You're listening to the Boxing Breakdown Report with resident Wager Talk handicapper Kevin Dolan. Get all your latest pro boxing tips at the SportsWolf83 on Twitter.
What's happening, boxing bettors? Welcome into another episode of the Boxing Breakdown Report with me, your host Kevin Dolan, where each and every week we'll give our thoughts on that weekend's most high-profile fights, and more importantly, the best value bets you made in each one. So let's get into this week. Biggest fight in the card this week's going to be Jermell Charlo versus Tony Harrison. The rematch happening on Saturday night. That's the rematch from last year's fight, which happened last December between the pair, which ended in a Harrison unanimous decision. Before we jump into that, let's talk quickly about Friday night fight between Danny Jacobs and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Look, despite the train wreck that Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is, he still puts eyeballs, he still puts bums on seats. We look back a few years ago when he fought Canelo. That fight sold over 1 million pay-per-views. Look, Canelo's the biggest star in boxing. Nonetheless, he can't do that on his own. Chavez Jr., despite his complete train wreck of a career so far, he's still a popular fighter, and people are kind of still interested in what he has to offer. And you know, even though Chavez Jr. gets slated so much by the media, look, there was a period, I'd say between 2010 to 2012, where, he looked dangerous. He looked like a serious threat to the middleweight division. Now, obviously, we're talking 7-8 years ago. In my opinion, the zenith of his career came when he fought Andy Lee. I thought that was his most impressive performance. We touched on a previous breakdown report the power that Andy Lee possessed. You know, this is the Andy Lee who's currently training Tyson Fury as well in the Kronk gym. Look, Andy Lee was just one of those guys we said if he cracked you right, you were going to crumble. And the thing about that fight is, when they fought in Texas, he was cracking Chavez Jr. all night long. And Chavez Jr. was just smiling, walking through it, and eventually stopped him in the 7th round. So there was a period where, this guy's serious. Like, he had that kind of Antonio Margarito style, come forward style, very aggressive, and he just broke you down. And, it's a shame to see that guy who had so much potential kind of fall to the wayside, through, so many things, failed drugs test. Like, it's just, career's just been one train wreck after another. And even just talking about that Andy Lee fight right there, there was even massive controversy in that fight where Emmanuel Stewart, one of the greatest trainers of all time, who was training Andy Lee for that fight, they had a kind of conspiracy theory about what might have been in Chavez Jr.'s gloves. They wanted to weigh the gloves. Obviously, we just talked about Margarito style, so I mean, it all ties in there. They wanted to weigh the gloves because there were suspicions. And basically, Freddie Roach, who did train Chavez Jr. at that time, he refused. So, even when he was at his peak, there was still controversy at that time. So, again, you're looking at a line now which is Danny Jacobs minus 2,500, completely unbettable. Nonetheless, Chavez Jr. coming back at a plus 900, plus 1,000. Nonetheless, I expect Danny Jacobs to win. And just the fact that, this fight mightn't even take place. The Zone have her promoted. Where Gabe Rosado, look, there's always going to be stand-ins. It's happened before. But it never to such an extent where the stand-in is put firmly in the spotlight even before the main fight is due to take place. Like, they have Gabe Rosado, who's due to fight on the undercard. They have him as, look, if Chavez Jr., if something goes wrong, which they're kind of half expecting, this is the guy who's going to step up to face Danny Jacobs. It just shows you the complete lack of faith in even Chavez Jr. turning up prepared and ready to fight on fight night. So, just an interesting thing. But I do feel, the kind of the media hate towards Chavez Jr. But I just like to say, just on a side note, there was a brief 2-year period before he even fought Sergio Martinez for the middleweight title where, he did look kind of dangerous. He looked like a guy that might be there, and he's just completely wasted his career through pretty much bad decisions. We're going to move on now, Saturday night. So Jermell Charlo's taking on Tony Harrison, as we said in the rematch. Let's go through the tail of the tape for this. Jermell Charlo, 32-1, his only loss coming last December against Tony Harrison. 16 KOs. Tony Harrison's 28-2 with 21 KOs. So 2 losses to him. Tony Harrison's the taller of the two fighters, and he's got the longer reach advantage, which he used quite effectively last year in last year's fight. They're both the same age, 29 years old. Now, just talking about, look, Charlo's the bigger star of these two, and you do feel as though he's the one the business of boxing would prefer to see succeed because of, the kind of razzmatazz the Charlo twins bring to the sport. Recently, we just heard about the Zone offering Charlo the Andrade fight. Again, the Charlos do good business. They're some of the PBC's biggest stars, so you definitely feel as though most boxing business people would prefer Charlo win this fight. Charlo's got a very good resume. I mean, he's beat Dennis Duggan, Gabe Rosado, who we just talked about for the Friday night fight, Vanis Martirosyan, and probably his best win to date was the one against Erickson Lubin. Now, I'm personally high on Erickson Lubin. I think Erickson Lubin, I actually bet in Lubin for that fight. He got caught flush cold early and completely went to sleep. So Charlo's definitely got that power. The only thing that I would say about Jermell Charlo, look, I used to be higher on Jermell. I used to prefer him of the two twins. I felt he had more finesse to his game. I felt he used angles more than Jermell. But there was a period 2 or 3 years ago where I think he might have got caught up with the whole knockout power that his brother was bringing. And maybe he wanted a piece of that. Because he started to, load up on his punches a lot more. Started to look for the KO instead of doing what he was doing before boxing. And I think it kind of impeded his game. I think he started to get a little worse. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. I preferred him, 2 or 3 years ago to where he's at now. Because let's face it, if you're looking for the fights, against your Jared Hurds, your Julian Williamses, you need to be getting past. Look, Tony Harrison's a good fighter, but he's not elite. So you need to be getting past these guys like Tony Harrison. Talking about Jared Hurd, the 2 losses on Tony Harrison's career, he got stopped by Jared Hurd. That's no bad loss because, look, despite what happened in the Julian Williams fight, Jared Hurd's still one of the top guys at 154. We've seen that over his win against Arislandi Lara. But he also got stopped by Willie Nelson. Now, I'm not talking about the folk singer here. I'm talking about the other Willie Nelson. So again, Tony Harrison, he's a good fighter. I think he's a benchmark fighter. But I think you definitely need to be beating guys like Tony Harrison to be involved in the conversation for best at 154. That's how we structured our play for this one. The other thing to say about this fight, look, as of this morning when we checked, the odds are all over the place for this fight. Now, the odds open, I think it was minus 200 for Charlo. We got it at minus 225, so we've put a 2% play on Jermell Charlo at minus 225. We like that play. We think it's a decent play. Only 2%, obviously, because the odds are high enough as it is. But we do expect Jermell Charlo to win this fight. But they're all over the place. We use Odds Checker. So multiple books show minus 225. Some books are showing minus 250, minus 275. Even offshore now, Pinnacle's got minus 315. So these odds are all over the place. If you can get minus 225 like we did, they were still out there as of today. I would suggest the 2% play on that. If you can't, if it's over 250, I'd leave it alone. Because I do expect Tony Harrison. Look, he won the first fight by unanimous decision, so he's going to make this competitive again. Also, as a side note, if you get a chance to see the press conference of these two, it makes for very good viewing. Tony Harrison's one of the wittiest guys in boxing. It's one of the most fun press conferences I've seen. So, yeah, definitely check that out. The reason that we like Jermell Charlo for this fight is, going back to revisiting the first fight, it just seemed like everything went right for Tony Harrison that fight. He started off very well. He seemed to be confusing Jermell Charlo in spots. And again, we just talked about the fact that Charlo seems to go full frontal over the last 2 or 3 years, looking for that big KO. Now, when it works out like it did against Erickson Lubin, it's fantastic. But when it doesn't work out, he looks aimless in there. And I do expect him to make some... He looked a lot more impressive, for instance. Look, Tony Harrison has been inactive since their first fight last December. He hasn't fought over the last year, which again feeds into why we like Charlo for this pick. Charlo comes off a KO of Jorge Cota back in June. So he's the one that's had the more fights now. He just had a tune-up fight, a make-up fight in June. Stay busy fight. So we like that as well. I do expect him. He looked better in that fight. Do expect him to work on some things. But the main thing is for us, Tony Harrison started well in their last fight, but he faded down the stretch. and Charlo still kept coming forward. Now, a lot of people had Charlo winning that first fight. So again, it's almost like everything went Harrison's way in the first fight. We don't expect it to be like that for the rematch. The business of boxing wants Charlo to succeed. Charlo's got the better stamina. I think he's got, even though Harrison's got the higher KO percentage, I think Charlo's got the advantage in power too. And I expect things to be rectified in this one. Again, I expect Charlo to win. So yeah, 2% play minus 225. Now, you know, we're slightly high on that. Yeah, again, only 2% play, but still, definitely worth an investment there. It's busy time for boxing. Christmas time, it doesn't matter. You know, there's so many fights to talk about. Next week's going to be December 28th. Very good fight. Gervonta Davis versus Yuriorkis Gamboa. And then John Pascal, another good fight. John Pascal versus Badu Jack. Also, so, no time off of the Boxing Breakdown report over the festive period. So, yeah, we'll definitely stick a 2% play. Jermell Charlo minus 225. Shop around, because obviously we just said there's some shops showing minus 250, minus 275. But we've seen 5 different books showing minus 225 as of today. So, definitely get on that. That should wrap things up for this episode of the Boxing Breakdown report. As always, I look forward to reading your comments below, and you can follow me over at Wager Talk or on Twitter at the SportsWolf83. We'll be back next week, as we said, for the Gervonta Davis fight. So until then, good luck on all your bets, and Slán Abhaile.